The cave paintings were never warning the people of Fromville about what was coming. They were showing them where to go. And if that sounds impossible, look at what the series has been doing from the beginning. The caves are not covered with random drawings. They contain repeated images, strange figures, trees, symbols, creatures, and patterns that seem almost impossible to understand when viewed individually. But what if that is exactly the mistake? What if we have been treating the paintings like a message when they are actually a map? Because a map does not have to look like a map. It can be made of symbols. It can be made of repeated landmarks. And most importantly, it can show a route without ever telling you the destination. That changes almost everything we thought we understood about the caves. Because the real question is no longer, what do these drawings mean? The real question becomes, where are they trying to take us? And this is where the theory gets disturbing. The cave paintings may not be describing the history of Fromville. They may be describing the path through it. Every major symbol could represent a location, a stage, or a transition. And if that is true, then the paintings may have already revealed the route to the place the characters have been searching for. But here's what changes everything. The people inside Fromville have spent years trying to escape by moving outward. The paintings may be telling them that escape requires moving inward. Deeper. Not toward the road. Not toward the forest. Not toward the edge of town. But toward the original source of the nightmare. That possibility completely reframes the caves. Because why would whoever created these drawings bother documenting the same terrifying images over and over? Unless those images were instructions. Look at the way the show uses symbols. Trees matter. Ravens matter. Children matter. The monsters matter. The strange structures matter. Even the repeated circular and branching patterns matter. They are not necessarily separate pieces of mythology. They could be coordinates. And this is the detail everyone missed. A map doesn't need to tell you what something is. It only needs to tell you where it is. That means some of the strangest cave drawings may not represent creatures at all. They may represent places. A figure could be a landmark. A tree could mark a turning point. A group of symbols could represent a sequence. And a repeated image could mean, you are here. Suddenly, the caves become less like an ancient warning and more like a navigation system left behind by someone who already understood the rules. But who made it? That is where the theory becomes much darker. Because if the paintings were created by someone who understood the route through Fromville, then that person knew something the current residents don't. They knew the town was not random. They knew the forest was not random. And they may have known that the monsters were only one part of a much larger system. That possibility fits one of the most important patterns in the entire series. Every time the characters believe they have discovered the source of the problem, they find another layer underneath it. The monsters are not the whole mystery. The tunnels are not the whole mystery. The forest is not the whole mystery. The lighthouse is not the whole mystery. And that is exactly why the cave paintings matter. They may be the oldest surviving record of the system itself. Not a record of what happened. A record of how to navigate what happened. And if you read them that way, one terrifying possibility appears. The paintings may describe a cycle, a route that has been traveled before, again, and again, and again. That would explain why so many images seem strangely familiar despite belonging to completely different moments. Because they may not be showing different events. They may be showing the same journey, repeating through different people. Think about what that would mean for the characters. Every person who arrives in Fromville thinks they are experiencing something unique. But perhaps they are simply entering a path that was already walked by others. The town doesn't need to invent new rules. It only needs to repeat the old ones. And this is where it gets darker. If the cave paintings are a map, then someone eventually reached the end of that map. Someone followed the route far enough to document it. And that person may have failed. Because if they had succeeded completely, why would the map still be there? Maybe the paintings are not instructions for escape. Maybe they're instructions for reaching the final chamber. The place beneath everything. The place where the rules were created. And perhaps that is why the forest keeps redirecting people. Why paths seem to change. Why familiar locations appear at impossible distances. Why the characters can travel for hours and somehow remain trapped inside the same nightmare. Fromville may not simply be a geographical location. It may be a controlled route, a maze. And the cave paintings may be the only surviving diagram of that maze. That would explain something else. The characters constantly search for physical boundaries. They look for roads. They look for electricity. They look for signals. They look for a way through the trees. But what if the boundary isn't physical? What if the real prison is the sequence? You cannot escape because you're following the wrong path. You cannot leave because you're trying to move in the wrong direction. And the cave paintings may have been created specifically to solve that problem. Not by warning future victims, but by showing them the correct order. First this, then this, then this, and eventually the source. That makes the repeated imagery far more important. Because repetition is exactly how maps communicate routes when written language isn't available. A symbol appears, then another, then another. The viewer learns the sequence. The terrifying possibility is that the characters have already encountered several of these symbols without realizing what they were seeing. And that means the map may already be unfolding around them. They just don't know they're following it. But there is one final question. If someone created this map, why hide it inside the caves? Why put it somewhere most people would never willingly enter? Unless the cave itself is part of the map. Unless entering the cave is not simply discovering the message. Unless entering the cave is the first step of following it. And if that is true, then the characters haven't found the map. The map may have found them. Because perhaps Fromville doesn't bring people into the caves by accident. Perhaps it keeps leading them there because the caves are where the next stage begins. And if the paintings really are a map, then the most terrifying image on those walls may not be showing what happens to the people trapped in Fromville. It may be showing what happens after they finally reach the end. The biggest mistake the characters could make is assuming the cave paintings are telling them what to fear. Because what if they're telling them what to follow? That single difference changes the meaning of almost every symbol. A warning says, "Stay away." A map says, "Go here." And From has repeatedly shown us something strange about the people who survive the town. They don't simply discover locations. They're pulled toward them. The forest pushes them toward certain places. Dreams reveal locations before characters understand their meaning. Symbols appear before the characters know what they represent. And people experience visions connected to events they have never personally witnessed. That is not how a normal haunting works. It looks much more like a navigation system. Something is guiding people through a predetermined sequence. And if the cave paintings are part of that sequence, then the strange drawings may be less about mythology and more about direction. Think about the trees. Trees are everywhere in From, but not all trees behave the same way. Some are obstacles. Some seem to mark impossible locations. Some become connected to movement, disappearance, or passage. The bottle tree is especially important because it transforms an ordinary tree into something that contains information. Bottles hold messages. A tree holds the messages. That is not just decoration. It is another example of information being hidden inside a natural landmark. Now look back at the cave paintings. The same basic idea appears again. Natural objects become symbols. Symbols become information. And information becomes a route. This could explain why the town's supernatural rules are so obsessed with specific locations. The talismans only work inside structures. The faraway trees connect different places. The lighthouse exists somewhere beyond the ordinary geography of the town. The tunnels connect the surface to something hidden underneath. Nothing is simply where it appears to be. Every location has a function. And that is exactly what you would expect from a maze. You don't build a maze by making every wall identical. You create landmarks. You create false paths. You create repeated patterns. And you create specific locations that act as checkpoints. Now here's the disturbing part. What if the cave paintings are showing those checkpoints? What if the monsters themselves are not the destination? What if they are obstacles placed along the route? That would completely change how we should interpret the creatures. The monsters spend the night hunting. They smile. They talk. They manipulate. They pretend to be human. But they rarely behave like creatures that simply want to kill as quickly as possible. They play with people. They wait. They create emotional pressure. They exploit memories. They understand fear. That suggests their role may be larger than simple predators. Perhaps they are guardians. Not guardians protecting the people from something outside, but guardians preventing them from reaching something deeper. And this is where the cave map theory becomes dangerous. Because a maze needs guards. A prison needs guards. A controlled experiment needs obstacles. If Fromville is designed around a path, then the monsters could be part of the system that forces people to stay on that path. They don't need to kill everyone. They only need to kill the people who move too far too quickly or in the wrong direction. That would explain why survival in Fromville feels so inconsistent. Sometimes characters make incredibly dangerous choices and survive. Other times, one small mistake leads to disaster. Maybe randomness is not actually randomness. Maybe the town is responding to progress. The closer someone gets to the truth, the more aggressively the system reacts. And if the cave paintings show the route, then discovering their meaning could be one of the most dangerous things anyone has ever done in Fromville. Because knowledge changes the rules. Look at Jade. He doesn't survive because he is physically stronger than everyone else. He survives because he refuses to stop searching for patterns. He sees connections other people dismiss. He understands that the symbols are telling him something. And notice what happens as his obsession grows. The mystery becomes more personal. The visions become more intense. The past starts invading the present. That is exactly what you would expect if Jade is getting closer to the underlying system. But here's what changes everything. Jade may not be discovering a new mystery. He may be remembering an old one. What if the symbols feel familiar because the people trapped in Fromville have encountered this cycle before? What if the visions are fragments of previous attempts? What if the town does not erase everything after each cycle? What if it leaves pieces behind? Paintings, trees, symbols, dreams, memories, children, objects. All of them could be fragments of the same unfinished message. And that gives us a terrifying explanation for why the town contains so many contradictions. It isn't one story. It is layers of stories stacked on top of each other. Different people, different eras, same route, same destination, same failure. That would also explain the importance of the children. Children appear again and again at the center of the mythology. They are connected to visions, sacrifices, memory, and the oldest mysteries of the town. But perhaps we have been asking the wrong question. We keep asking, who are the children? Maybe the better question is, where are they standing? Because if the paintings are a map, their position matters more than their identity. A figure drawn beside a tree could mean something completely different from the same figure drawn beneath the structure. The location may be the message. And this is where the entire visual language of From becomes more interesting. The show rarely explains its symbols directly. Instead, it makes us see them repeatedly. That forces the audience to remember them. A symbol appears. Then a character encounters something connected to it. Then another symbol appears. Then a new location becomes important. The audience is subconsciously building a map without realizing it. And perhaps that is intentional. Maybe the viewers are supposed to solve the route before the characters do. Because the cave paintings may not be there to explain the past. They may be there to predict the future. If the sequence can be decoded, the next location could theoretically be identified before the characters reach it. And that would create the ultimate advantage. For the first time, someone inside Fromville could stop reacting to the town and start moving ahead of it. But there is a problem. The town may already know that. And this is where the theory becomes much darker. What if the system deliberately allows people to discover the map? What if understanding the symbols is not the way out but another test? Because a maze can give you a map and still trap you. In fact, giving someone incomplete information can be more effective than giving them none. You show them enough to create confidence. Then you change one rule, one symbol, one location, one direction, and suddenly the map becomes a trap. That could explain why From constantly makes knowledge feel dangerous. Every answer creates another question. Every discovery opens another door. Every apparent solution reveals a deeper layer. The characters aren't simply solving a mystery. They're being trained to understand the system. And perhaps the cave paintings are the oldest version of that training. Someone before them already figured out enough to draw the route. But they never figured out the final step. which means the final section of the map may be missing. Or worse, it may have been deliberately left blank, because whoever reached that point discovered something so terrifying that they could not draw what came next. And if that is true, then the most important part of the cave paintings may be the part that isn't there. The missing destination. The blank space. The place where the map stops. Because maybe that isn't where the journey ends. Maybe that's where the real world begins. And if the characters are already approaching that point, then the caves aren't showing them how to survive Fromville. They're showing them how to reach the thing that created it. And now we reach the most dangerous possibility of all. If the cave paintings are a map, then someone had to create the map. And whoever created it understood something about Fromville that the current characters still don't. They understood the route. They understood the symbols. They understood the places. And most importantly, they understood where the route was supposed to end. But what if they didn't create the map to help people escape? What if they created it because they knew escape was impossible? That would explain why the paintings feel less like instructions and more like fragments of a memory. A person trapped inside an endless system might eventually stop trying to destroy the maze. Instead, they would try to understand it. They would record everything. Every creature. Every landmark. Every strange event. Every doorway. Every tree. Every symbol. And eventually, those observations could become a map. Not a map of geography. A map of behavior. A map showing what happens when you move from one part of the system to another. And that gives the cave paintings a terrifying purpose. They may be the surviving record of previous cycles. Not one previous cycle. Many. This would explain why the mythology of Fromville feels ancient, but also strangely connected to the present. The people change. The technology changes. The houses change. But the same patterns keep returning. The same fears. The same symbols. The same supernatural forces. The same impossible locations. The same struggle between those who want to understand and those who simply want to survive. That repetition is too important to ignore. Because a true map doesn't care who uses it. It only records the terrain. And perhaps Fromville has been recording itself for centuries. The cave paintings are simply the oldest surviving version. Then the bottles became another version. The talismans became another. The symbols became another. The stories told by survivors became another. And the visions became another. Different languages. Same information. Look at what the show is actually telling us. The characters are surrounded by clues, but those clues rarely explain themselves. They appear in different forms. A vision here. A symbol there. A strange object somewhere else. A repeated phrase. A location that should not exist. A person who seems connected to another time. Individually, these things look meaningless. Together, they form a pattern. And that is exactly how a map works. You don't understand it from one mark. You understand it when the marks connect. But here's the part that should make us uncomfortable. What if the map is not describing the route the characters should take? What if it is describing the route the town wants them to take? That changes the entire concept of free will inside Fromville. Maybe the characters believe they are making choices. But the system has already predicted those choices. It doesn't need to control every decision. It only needs to control the environment around those decisions. Close one road. Create one vision. Send one person into the forest. Place one object in the right location. Make one character remember something at exactly the wrong moment. And suddenly everyone moves where the system wants them to move. This could explain why coincidence feels almost supernatural in From. Because coincidence may be part of the mechanism. The town doesn't simply trap people physically. It manipulates the circumstances that shape their decisions. And if the cave paintings show the route, then perhaps they reveal how this manipulation works. Each major symbol could represent a turning point, a decision, a sacrifice, a discovery, a death, a doorway, a transformation. The map may not say, go left. It may say, when this happens, you will reach the next stage. And that is far more terrifying, because it means the characters may not be able to simply choose another path. They may have to break the cycle itself. And that brings us back to the monsters. For years, they have been treated as the obvious enemy. But what if they are actually symptoms? What if killing monsters doesn't solve anything because the monsters are not the source? They are simply one part of the system, like guards in a prison. Remove one guard, and another appears. Destroy one monster, and another takes its place, because the prison itself remains. That would explain why every victory in From feels temporary. The characters survive a night. They discover a new rule. They find a new shelter. They understand the talismans. But the town remains. The system adapts. The deeper they go, the more complicated the rules become. And that suggests the real objective was never survival. It was understanding. The town wants them to keep asking questions. Or perhaps the people who built the system designed it that way. Either possibility leads to the same terrifying conclusion. The cave paintings are not an explanation. They are an invitation. They tell you there is a path. They tell you the path has been walked before. And they tell you the destination exists. But they do not tell you what waits there. That missing information may be intentional. Because perhaps the final destination is the one thing nobody who reached it was able to describe. And this gives us a possible explanation for the strange relationship between memory and Fromville. Memory may be another map. People remember fragments. A face. A symbol. A child. A song. A place. A feeling. But never the complete story.
Why?
Because complete memory would reveal the route. The system needs people to remember just enough to continue searching, but not enough to understand the entire pattern. And this is why the characters who obsess over the past become so important. They are reconstructing the map. They are taking disconnected pieces and putting them together. And if someone finally completes that map, they could potentially see something the town never wanted them to see. The entire cycle, beginning to end, cause to consequence, arrival to destination. And that would be the ultimate threat to Fromville. Not a weapon. Not a stronger monster. Not another escape attempt. Understanding. Because once you understand the maze, you stop being afraid of the walls. You start looking for the door. And maybe that is why the cave paintings matter so much. They represent the moment when humanity first began to understand the structure of the prison. Someone looked at the nightmare and refused to see chaos. They saw a pattern. They saw a route. They saw a map. And they left it behind. For the next person. For the next cycle. For the next group of trapped people. And now the characters may finally be close to completing what those earlier survivors started. But there is one final possibility that makes this theory even more disturbing. What if the map has already been completed? What if the characters aren't discovering a route that nobody knows? What if someone has already reached the destination, and the entire story of Fromville is what happened afterward? That would mean the cave paintings aren't showing the beginning of the mystery. They're showing the aftermath. The monsters. The children. The trees. The symbols. The endless roads. All of it could be evidence of what happens when someone reaches the center. And if the center of Fromville is not a place but a choice, then escaping might require doing the one thing every previous survivor refused to do. Not run, not hide, not fight, but break the pattern. Refuse the route. Refuse the role the town has assigned. Refuse to follow the map. Because perhaps the final destination is only reachable when someone stops following the path completely. And that brings us back to the cave paintings. Maybe they are a map. Maybe they were created by survivors. Maybe they record the route through the nightmare. But perhaps their greatest secret isn't where the path leads. It is why the path keeps repeating. Because if the same journey has happened over and over again, then the real mystery isn't, how do they escape Fromville? The real mystery is, who keeps sending them back? And if Season 4 finally answers that question, the cave paintings may be revealed for what they truly are. Not a warning about the monsters. Not a history of the town. But a record of every person who came close to finding the exit and what happened when they got there.